Yo, what up? My name is Don, and I've been playing a lot of Overwatch lately, grinding for the end title in this season 11, which is the boss title. And as a Moira support main player, I just wanted to come on here and give 8 quick tips and tricks that I think would help anybody become a better Moira player. So, with that said, let's hop right in. All right, so tip number one is to be active 24/7. The goal is to make it where there is very little downtime, where your healing bar is depleted completely. As you shoot your healing orbs into your tank or whoever else is on your team, you should be hunting for targets to immediately refill the heal bar, and doing this as often as possible. The more you're able to overlap, draining the enemy team's health to keep your health bar filled while keeping focused fire on specific enemy players, the easier your team fights will be overall. This is a great habit to pick up, especially if you have a tank who likes to play aggressively, as the better that you get at managing your healing orbs and heal spray, the more your tank can be and will be in the fight. And with how strong tanks are, you absolutely want to keep them engaged in the fight. A Reinhardt who isn't afraid to swing that hammer because they're getting consistent heals during a fight is 100 times more difficult to deal with. Rein does not have any ability that temporarily bolsters his health, so heals are even more important to this hero. Tip number two is that you want to maximize your orb time. So try to maximize your orb time by bouncing it off surfaces and getting use out of its second or third pass by. This can easily and very quickly add a few hundred health to your team or take a few hundred health off the enemy team in a moment's notice and swing the team fights in your favor. The AoE damage might be seen as awesome to some players, but many don't see the actual potential of well placed orbs when that AoE healing or damage passes by your team 3 times in the same fight. There are plenty of games I end up doubling my own healer's heals or the enemy team's heals while putting out as much DPS as my DPS heroes because of my ability to maximize that AoE damage. There are plenty of games I end up doubling my own healer's heals or the enemy team's healer's heals while putting out. There are plenty of games I end up doubling my own healer's heals or doing just as much heals. So if you're in a team fight situation, always be trying to look for angles and surfaces where you can bounce your orbs off to maximize that heal or damage AoE. Next is paying attention to the other healer. This should be obvious, but depending on your heal duo, you can really bolster your own output by keeping up your secondary healer. I personally love playing alongside Mercy players because I am an aggressive player myself. I often get my ult charged earlier than most others, and so whether I use my ult to help my team push by ulting through my tank so they can push and simultaneously get heals, or go full offense and melt a few players on the other team, keeping a Mercy up in this example so they can keep your damage or heal boosted longer can be the difference between easily doubling the other support player's statistics and not only healing, but effectively keeping up with your DPS player stats, as well as having a huge effect on the outcome of the match and actually the outcome of every individual fight. Next up is when you want to go full DPS Moira. So if your other healer is strong and you're playing full DPS Moira, keep pressure on their back line because most other supports are no match for the AoE damage that they take from your damage orb on top of holding right click down on them. By occupying the other two supports' time or just keeping them tied up or taking one of them down and keeping the other one busy until you can pick the next backline 1v1 fight, you'll be making the main fight so much easier for your team. Next up is those 1v1 fights. You can win most 1v1 fights and even 2v1 fights and more by using the environment to bounce damage orbs off of, or even just having good movement in terms of strafing or being aware of where the other person is shooting so you can counter strafe them. And although this may seem obvious, you can also confuse other players with your Fade ability pretty easily, which is another great aspect of Moira's mobility. Using Fade, you can quickly get behind or otherwise out of sight of the person you're fighting's vision and continue damaging them with your damage orb being out and then phase back in and finish them off while they frantically whip around searching for you. As you get better at this movement, you'll be able to weave vertical movement into things, as when you fade, you can jump and you gain some acceleration, so you can eventually get up into places that you may not have been able to get before. This leads us into Moira's mobility. Moira's mobility is your best friend and your superpower, as she can zip around in and out of fights or get in and out of situations with a breeze as long as you have good keyboard mechanics. So this is something that takes practice, of course. You should practice jumping over or around obstacles so you can get in and out of fights that every other hero would be stuck in, and overall reduce how many times you die, which is going to have a huge effect on the game. If you're not dying, you're going to have more time to charge your ult, and obviously if you have more time to charge your ult and you can gain your ult more times per game, you're going to have a big effect on team fights. Especially if, while your team is waiting to res and is running back up to the point of the fight, like on a push map, where the run back can be fairly long, you're constantly poking and prodding at the other team with damage orbs, and your right click to try and squeeze every single percentage that you can out of building your ult up to max. That brings us to focus firing. Focus firing is something that's super important, and the better you get at it while healing during a fight, the easier that the team fights are going to be. So try to keep your eyes on the prize as you're in the background healing or in the enemy's background getting some sneaky beaky damage in. And you'll want to pay attention to who your DPS is attacking or even who your tank is attacking, because sometimes the tank goes after the back line and will just go after the healers right away. If you can get a quick pick on a healer, the rest of the fight is going to be very easy, especially if the other tank is attached to your tank while your tank is attached to their healers. If you can keep their tank off your team, you are in a better position to win that fight. So, if your DPS or your tank is attacking the healers, you want to help focus fire those targets down. It's super effective to help them finish their fights faster, even if you don't throw a damage orb, just by complementing their damage by holding down your right click on the enemy. This can work extra effectively with dive type characters such as Venture and Sombra, or even Tracer, who are naturally aggressive type heroes. Lastly, that brings me to positioning. Now, while this applies to every hero, I find that Moira is rewarded a bit of extra freedom in where you should be in a fight, as opposed to other heroes like Ana, who would generally be best played from a decent distance behind your team, unless you're me, of course, and you like playing Ana like a Genji and being right beside your tank as they smash on the enemies once you get an awesome anti-heal off. Moira can zip in and out of fights as she pleases, and so because of that, where you should be depends entirely on how the fight is going, and more specifically, this means that you should always be looking for those open pockets of opportunity to pick a few players off. A lot of people expect Sombra and other DPS players to flank aggressively, but nobody expects the wild, out of his mind Moira player. So while some of these tips may seem pretty obvious, and none of them are too deep, when you combine them all in a team game, you can be one of the most annoying players in the map. And often I find myself being targeted by tanks or, being hounded by DPS specifically because I won't let their healers have a break. Or just the other day, I was in a game where a Pharah said, Moira, all my deaths are because of you. Leave me alone. And I knew I was doing my job, and there's a huge smile on my face because, often in games where you have a hit scan type hero, say like a Hanzo, a McCree, or something like that, and they're not really doing their job effectively, I get it completely because especially in Overwatch 1, was a long time Hanzo main player. And so sometimes hitting a Pharah can be hard, especially if they're a good Pharah player. And some Pharah players play it a little bit more like Quake, where they're not always in the air and they're actually just playing Quake, where they're like strafing, with just like a rocket launcher on the ground and only using the vertical movement of Pharah to in situations where they have to dodge. That is this kind of new meta that I've seen kind of happen lately because normally it's like, especially in Overwatch 1, it was like you see a Pharah, you're going to see a Mercy. The Mercy's pocketing the Pharah, and we're going to need a Hanzo or something, or a soldier, or even, I didn't mention soldier before, but you could use a soldier to pick that Pharah out of the sky. But now, there are other ways that people are using Pharah, and I think it's quite effective. So with Moira, don't underestimate how far that your right click can actually reach in terms of like DPSing a Pharah down or getting a Mercy down, or even if you have to try and hunt a Lucio who's just skating all around, the whole Megadome. When you combine all these things, you really are a force to be reckoned with. And some players may say Moira is the most difficult hero to play. I say she's the most fun hero to play. She has the best feeling mobility. She has the best feeling kit in the game. Not only can you have such great effect on healing other players and damaging the other team, but you are so self-sufficient. And while other heroes in the game have healing mechanics and have mitigation mechanics, and tanks have abilities that temporarily bolster their health so they don't die so easily, Moira doesn't really have mitigation techniques, but really you could ultimately say that her mobility doubles as mitigation because of the fact of how many difficult situations you can get out of. There's been so many times I've been in front of a Diva's face or a Maga's face, and I just zoom and I'm gone. And they're just like, huh? Right? Because they have no idea where I went. So I love playing Moira, and I think if you employ some of these tips, you will absolutely love playing Moira. If you're not a Moira player yet, give her a chance. She's a super fun hero. And if you liked any of the tips that I gave you here or have any input, please add them down in the comments below. And as always, like, share, and especially subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.